Okay, hey, we're going to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a really special review for you guys from the brand Omega. They were founded back in 1848. They are Swiss made and they are part of Swatch Group's luxury tier. Although, one thing I will mention, although they do fall under the Swatch Group, they actually, their original merger with Tissot was a precursor to what eventually became to be known as the Swatch Group. So I'd say their history is a touch more pure than more of the other brands within the group that were kind of just revived or saved during that quartz crisis of the 1970s. In terms of the type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in design, which you're looking for a diver. Of course, you're going to want water resistance, typically with some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is a very special model. This is their Seamaster Planet Ocean 6,000 meter ultra deep as part of the 5 Deeps expedition in back in 2019. The Ultra Deep made history when it reached the deepest place on Earth. Following that world record dive, the game-changing watch has now been adapted for a unique collection available to the public. Tested in real ocean conditions during its development, the design is water-resistant to 6,000 meters or 20,000 feet and meets the ISO 6425 2018 standard for saturation divers watches. So this essentially just honors Omega's dive watch legacy with their latest technologies. This normally goes for $13,600 MSRP, or you can get this particular example pre-owned from Belmont Watches locally in San Diego for $10,150, which is quite a deal, and I'm going to talk to you about why, as I know that on paper a lot of you might be thinking this watch is just a bit too much, but I will say, guys, it actually is not, surprisingly. The thickness and everything like that, it's actually surprisingly wearable, especially in this fixed lug titanium variation. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys, big shout out to Belmont Watches for lending this piece in. Also, of course, got a little bit of the EDC around it, and that's because this is made out of titanium. And I have to say, I am actually really impressed with the finishing and the craftsmanship on this titanium. Check out those crisp lines. Of course, it is all matte blasted, guys, but this is superbly finished, even down to the hardware on the NATO strap. My goodness, look at how beautifully done this is. Look at the little chamfers and bevels. Everything is just super crisp, and the light even plays really nicely off of these different facets. And just to kind of have a comparison, this is a Chris Reeves Sabenza. This is actually a 31. It's one of their newer models. But if you look at the bevel lines and the crispness here, I mean, Chris Reeves, these are not cheap knives. These are made here in the US to extremely tight tolerances. And yeah, my first thought was, man, it actually really reminds me of the bevels on a Sabenza in terms of how fine and just beautifully pronounced they are. If I can get it to focus there you go. So very, very cool, guys. We'll go ahead and pull that off, and then, you know, of course, we got pens and whatnot. So if you're into EDC, chances are blasted titanium is going to be within your daily kind of carry here and there. So you do have an option here for something that is really, really quite special. So let's get into those numbers, right? So it's actually 45.5 millimeters wide, which isn't that, you know, unheard of in terms of diver watches. And in terms of the bezel, which is kind of that secret measurement, is 43.8. So not too shabby at all. It's really going to be that thickness of 18 millimeters, which a lot of you are like, 18 millimeters, that seems overly thick. I mean, 18 millimeters, even for a chronograph, some of you are going to think that's going to be overly thick. But again, this also is water resistant to 6,000 meters. But I will say that 18 millimeters is surprisingly wearable and honestly not that much different than another relatively deep diver. Look at that. that's actually just a standard Tudor Pelagos. Well, it's the left-hand drive model, but if you look there, check that out. Visually, that doesn't even look any thicker. Like, that's just, they look very comparable. And again, it has to do with the fact that, hey, there's more to it than the ultimate numbers, because look, here you have the slab side, here you do have these facets, and that does help thin the watch out visually. Of course, there's a little bit more of a bump on that backside, but when you're going to be really looking at it at that profile, typically when it's on your wrist, it's going to be lower profile because that will be sunken into your wrist. So when you actually look at it, I will say in terms of wear profile, it wears very, very similar to the Tudor Pelagos. And of course, this is also on loan from our friends at Belmont Watches. So look forward to this review at a later date. But I did want to point that out because a lot of you guys are, again, you're seeing something like this. I mean, obviously, it's going to be price prohibitive for a lot of people. This is a very expensive watch, especially expensive for a tool watch. Some people, if they're going to spend this kind of money, they're going to want something more ornate, something fancier and more luxurious. Here, the luxury is going to be within the capability, right? You got to think, if you're thinking of cars, you're thinking a hypercar, right? A car that can go 220 miles an hour. Are you ever going to use that? No. You would really even have to go to a special place. You'd have to go to like the Nürburgring, or, you'd have to go to a salt flat. You'd have to for you to realistically utilize that, it's, again, you're spending more money to do that, but that's kind of part of the charm, right? So if you have something that can go deeper than whatever. You show up at a dive watch meet and you have kind of the ultimate trump card when it comes to watch collectors. And I think there's something to be said about that. And this particular model really embraces the functional nature in terms of its build, right? With that titanium hull, my goodness. And the finishing, again, still to an absolute luxury level of precision. So very, very impressive. This one really jumped out at me. Grade 5 titanium, guys. Of course, grade 2 is more pure, but grade 5 is a different alloy. It has other elements mixed in that do make it stronger and more scratch resistant. The bezel is really well done. 120 clicks. I'm going to say something kind of crazy here, guys. This is better than any steel Planet Ocean bezel I've ever handled. It just feels more solid, and I don't know even how that's possible with titanium. Typically, the titanium variation of a steel, bezel is always going to feel a little bit lighter, a little bit more hollow, have a little bit more slack in play in it. This bezel action is awesome. It has a nice click, still extremely smooth, beautifully balanced, because sometimes things can be overly clicky. They can be kind of rough and you don't even want to handle it. So because it's too clicky, or they can be so smooth that it just doesn't feel precise and it can feel a bit sloppy. But this is really well done. So again, I feel like this has better action. So, I mean, if the steel version of this, I imagine that has to have probably one of the best bezel actions out there, because this is surely one of the best titanium bezel actions I've experienced. And yeah, typically steel is going to have a bit of an advantage over titanium in terms of bezel action. Now, the crystal sapphire on both sides, also curved on both sides, so you're going to keep that really still quite legible even at very harsh angles. And of course, you're never going to be reading the time from this angle, but it's nice to know that in terms of just enjoying your watch, you can still get down into those beautiful details. Look at that hand. I think that's something that is a little undersold. That seconds hand with that gradient blue fade on it is very, very cool. Now, inside, although you can't see the movement, let's actually do this, because this is, on a fabric strap. Check that out. That is very, very cool. So inside of here, you're actually going to have the automatic Omega coaxial master chronometer, caliber 8912, 60-hour power reserve, 3.5 hertz beat rate, so 200 vibrations per hour, not quite 4 hertz, but to most people's eyes, you're not going to notice, but that is something to think about. You do get a bit of a slower, slightly maybe choppier beat than you would get from something like a standard 4 hertz or even a high beat 5 hertz, right? By comparison, this is, of course, going to be nice and smooth, comparable to a 3 hertz sweep, though. So still very nice. And it's also magnetically resistant to fields up to 15,000 Gauss, which is very nice. And this case back is very cool, guys. Check that out. That's just handsome. I mean, this is a tool watch. This is an absolute piece of kit, and I really dig that, especially, you know, prior service, Marine Corps. There's something about just an absolute tool watch that I can appreciate, and this does that. This is, you know, definitely no frills. There's definitely some flex there, but there's no frills in terms of what this package is really trying to accomplish. Now, in terms of the dial, it is very nice. It's a matte black, which, you know, I'd say even can pick up a bit of anthracite gray depending on the lighting situations. It actually has applied white gold indices and hands, so beautiful luster from that perspective. Nice. And again, they don't skimp out on the luxury. You do get also, I believe, two-tone lume in terms of I believe the bezel pip and the minute hand are going to match, I believe, and be green, and then it'll be blue everywhere else. But we'll test that here once we hit the lights. Actually, you know what? I don't want to wait that long, so let's just do that real quick and confirm. Okay. My notes were right. Awesome. So with that, actually, this does have a 22 millimeter lug, but you guys saw that since it is a fixed lug, technically you could put something smaller in there. This has a 22 millimeter beautifully done nylon NATO style strap. So you could technically go a little bit smaller if you wanted to, if you feel like 22 might be a little wide. I'm sure just having a little bit of that exposed isn't going to kill you. Right? Like having that's just actually looks kind of cool. So with that said, let's actually get this on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, this is not for the faint of heart. This is a large watch, and it is also on a NATO strap, so it's going to even sit a little bit higher above the wrist. This is absolutely a tool watch. Of course, if I do get it closer to the camera lens, it's going to give you a bit of distortion there in terms of the perspective, and it's going to look even larger. So what I'll do is I'll keep my wrist nice and low, and I'll just tighten up the shot here so you can get a bit of a truer aspect ratio. So I do have a 7.5-inch wrist, but it is quite round, so it's not like I have this big flat wide wrist that can accommodate every watch. But I gotta say, this looks like a big dive watch. It doesn't look, though, like some type of oversized monstrosity, which maybe some of the numbers might make you believe, right? If you think 18 millimeters thick, my goodness, sitting on a NATO strap at that. But I will say it's actually quite wearable and quite enjoyable. Of course, I'm not out wearing this piece, but I mean, just to test it on, this is definitely, you would think it'd be quite top heavy. But thanks to that titanium construction, it really mitigates that heftiness as much as possible, but while still feeling, again, still quite substantial. This is no lightweight by any means, but man, that thing looks darn good. I have to say, that is a very handsome look at the way the lugs just flow so beautifully. My goodness, this is just an extremely handsome piece. And I have some thick watches, guys. I collect Seikos, so you guys know that I've got some thick divers, I've got some thick chronographs, but man, this one is just very, very handsome. So let's not kid ourselves. Again, this isn't some thin one, but you could, again, you could easily swap this out for a different strap, maybe preserve this until if you're going to resell, if you're one of those, which is fine, right? That's how this one got on the market for a nice little discount. You could easily put a a single pass strap on there. I would personally like to see this on, maybe something from Erica's Originals or, that type of Marine National elastic strap. I think would be fantastic in this case. And the cool thing is, thanks to the way that these lugs are, with that relief cut into the lugs, you could actually easily mount this onto something like that. So I think that's just really, really cool, guys. So with that said, let's actually get this off, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Yes, now you did get a little peek of that loom, and it's just as you would suspect, really well applied. This is a deep diver, so you got to have a really nice thick application of loom, so you get that initial brightness as well as some nice long lasting rays as well. The one thing I always like to work in is going to be that low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to be coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. You can see the blue on this dial. It is electric, guys. That has so much contrast. You can see the dial also has a great amount of play, just beautifully dark, almost Vanta black. And then you get into some other lighting situations and you get a bit of an anthracite gray reflection off of there, which really suits the rest of that beautifully done, deep, dark, matte washed, matte blasted titanium. So that is just, I'm digging how that blue stands out. The blue on the strap and then the blue numerals on the dial. Very, very cool. And you can see, again, provides a lot of contrast, even in those kind of mixed lighting conditions. So very, very cool. This has been a bit of a long one, guys. Pause. But I will say, there's a lot to talk about. This was a really cool watch, and surprisingly enough, beautifully finished. Not that Omega is known for that, but I guess sometimes when you see something that's matte blasted, you just kind of imagine that it's just going to be quite minimalist and just so function forward in terms of the way that it's aesthetically leaning, that you won't have anything to be impressed by. But I think you guys hopefully will be able to tell here that there's still a lot. Just the level of precision, the crispness in those lines. It's truly outstanding. So closing thoughts, guys, on the wrist. Although a true beast, this surprisingly doesn't wear much thicker than a 42 millimeter Tudor Pelagos, guys. So again, that is a mainstream watch compared to this. And so if you are, looking and you are concerned, I would say don't be too concerned in terms of the thickness. It's going to wear like a big dive watch, but it's not going to be overpowering or unwearable by any means. In terms of model variants, this is actually now available in Omega Steel with traditional lugs on a rubber strap or a metal bracelet in various dial and bezel color combinations. But this is the one that Belmont Watches has currently, in stock. So definitely check this one out. Again, the price, about $10,000. Not going to be for everybody, but when you think about everything that you're getting for this money, it's actually quite a deal, especially when you think about the MSRP being, over 13 and a half. You're getting this closer to 10. So that's pretty nice, especially considering this is basically a new watch, because it's going to wear well. It's, it's not going to look bad with some more wear on it. If anything, it's going to kind of take on some really cool kind of snail trails and a little bit of extra sheen on there, and some of those high wear points. But because of those beautifully sharp, not sharp to the touch, but sharp to the eye case lines that are on there, I think honestly this is going to look better with age. So a lot like in terms of EDC stuff, right? Think Boba Fett, right? You can get that little bit of it looks better for the wear. Now, In terms of comparable models, this of course competes with all of those other luxury ultra deep diving divers. And people who enjoy and collect those types of divers do love a good thick diver with seemingly endless depth capabilities. So this is right within that range. Again, I don't think Omega put this out to try to make this the next Submariner, competitor. This is really going against the, special edition Sea Dwellers and challenge watches and whatnot. So very, very cool. Bottom line for me, guys, while admittedly not for everyone, the Ultra Deep is a solid flex among any group of dive watches. Like, it doesn't matter what anybody else has. They could have something that's vintage. You can put this next to it and it still has a lot of flex appeal, which, luxury brands and brand recognition, that's kind of, half the fun. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.